All right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for Connect and Share, our lunchtime webinar series. Today's topic is Michigan Building Basics, and we are hosting it in partnership with the Michigan Main Street program. My name is Lisa Ostemacher, and I'm the Communications and Training Specialist here at SHPO. For those of you less familiar with us, SHPO is a nonprofit membership association supporting community-based economic development. We host programs related to financial empowerment, rural issues, foreclosure prevention, and 2 AmeriCorps programs to start. Among the many membership benefits, SHPO works closely with policy advocacy and offers a range of training, resources, networking, and other educational tools at significantly discounted or free rates. One such resource is free access to all of our webinars, including Connect and Share Lunchtime Webinar Series. Connect and Share is a monthly webinar series on a variety of topics related to community-based economic development. The one that we're hosting today is a special promotion that is free to the public, but generally they have a non-member cost of $15 while members have free access. SHPO memberships are available at different levels depending on the size of your organization and the type of work you do. To learn more, visit shpom.info/membership. You can also call me at any time and we can talk more about how a membership with SHPO would benefit you and your organization. Without further ado, I am pleased to introduce today's speaker and topic. We are here today to learn about historic preservation that results downtown. Here to present is Debra Johnson, Design Specialist and Historic Architect with the Michigan Main Street and State Historic Preservation Office. Welcome, Debra, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm here to talk about the Michigan Main Street program, this is a vibrant program in the state of Michigan. The Main Street program is a grassroots, community, and volunteer-driven strategy which encourages economic development through historic preservation. Why do we need Main Street? If you look at some of the buildings on this slide, you'll see some reasons why we need Main Street. Some of our older buildings have been remodeled, shall we say, altered, covered in, covered over, and we want to try to bring these buildings back to a more aesthetic look. When you join the Main Street program, you usually start at the associate level. This is when the community learns and organizes to get ready for the Main Street program. The next level is the select level. This is you attain this level by applying to the program, and this is when you receive specialized services tailored to your community. And this is usually a 5-year program. After that, the next transition is to the master level, which we consider. The Main Street program is a comprehensive 4-point approach to organizing the downtown. We have 4 points that we approach: design, organization, promotion, and economic vitality. And if you look at the first 4 letters, they spell dope. And this is how I remember all 4 of our points. This is the organizational chart for a typical Main Street community. You can see at the bottom there are 4 committees, and these each are one of the points of the Main Street program. They report directly back to a DDA, or Main Street Board of Directors. And then we also have a program manager or director. The committees do not report to the manager or director, but directly to the board of directors. And it is a true grassroots program because the committees organize themselves to decide what projects they want to do based on some of the directives from the Main Street, but it's not the program manager who directs the committees. And also in parentheses you see committee variations. Sometimes based on the community in which the program is located, we have different ways of organizing the committees. Sometimes they will combine, sometimes they'll have more than one committee based on, for example, design. And we allow these kind of committee variations because our communities are very different. We have urban communities, such as in Lansing. We have rural communities. We have resort communities. We have agricultural communities. And so we like to have the Main Street organization tailored to that specific community's needs. The first committee we're going to discuss is the Design Committee, and this is the one that I'm usually related to most highly. We have 4 goals for our committee: the design and historic preservation, education and awareness, design and historic preservation, design assistance, public improvements, and incentives. Now, the organization committee has 3 goals. One is managing volunteers, fundraising, and public relations. The promotion committee is in charge with image campaigns, retail events, special events, and tourism. And the economic revitalization committee, their goals are business assistance, incentives, and property development. The Main Street program utilizes 8 different principles to achieve the effectiveness of their program, and we'll cover each of these very briefly. It is a comprehensive program. That is, it wants a balance of all 4 points. So you want to have design, organization, promotions, and economic vitality all work together and about at the equal level. You don't want to have all the promotions and no design. You want to have a balance between the 4. It's an incremental program. It took many years for some of our downtowns to get to the level they are today, so it's going to take several years for them to come back and shine as they used to shine. So it will be 1 storefront at a time. It'll be painting 1 cornice at a time. It'll be 1 mural at a time, and it'll be 1 banner at a time. And it is a self-help organization. This means the people of the community pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They're the ones that do the work for the program. So you can see in this slide, even the big old golden retriever should be helping out the community. And it is a public and private partnership. The community works with organizations within the community. It works with companies within the community. It best works when the whole community works together. And our communities capitalize on their existing assets. As I mentioned before, we have a variety of different communities that are located on rivers. So they have the riverfront as their asset. Some are agricultural communities, so they have farmers markets. Others have a huge resource of historic buildings. That's one of their assets. So we want each community to capitalize on their own existence, their own existing assets. And this is why each program is different from community to community. And we want to have quality work in our Main Street communities. So we want quality festivals. We want quality posters for the festivals. We want quality logos. We want quality signage. And we want quality buildings. So we would rather have quality in these items rather than the quantity of them. And we want to change. The communities that have the Main Street program have recognized that their community isn't what it used to be. So we want to have this change. And a lot of it is attitude. Attitude is everything. And perception. So perception is the reality. So there's going to be change in the community. You all probably have people in the community that are resistant to change. But this is to change, and it's a change for the better for your community. This is an action-oriented program. It's not the type of thing where you sit on a committee and just go to committee meetings. There will be painting, there will be planting, there will be cleaning up, and this will all be directed as the community wants to have the improvements done in their community. So what does Michigan Main Street do? It assists local communities in creating their very own Main Street program utilizing the 4-point approach. Those 4 points: the design, organization, promotions, and economic vitality. So we assist the local communities in their programs. We provide technical assistance, training, support, and networking opportunities for the Main Street programs. What Main Street used to be. So this is a little bit of going back in time to look at what our main streets used to be and how we want them to become again. Main streets used to be the hub of economic activity. This is when you would hitch your horse and your wagon together, go downtown to shop. Maybe you would go to the storefront with the chickens hanging in front, or you would get into your DeSoto car and pull into Main Street. But this is where the action was. If you went to shop, you went to shop downtown. Main Street used to be the hub of social activity. It is when James Cagney came to town, he was paraded down Main Street. It's when the troops came home from battle that they would parade down Main Street. It is when the marching band was celebrating something in the community, they would parade down Main Street. It was where the action was. Main Street used to be the hub of the political, governmental, and educational activities. A lot of governmental buildings were located on Main Street. Courthouses typically were located on Main Street. Fire departments were typically located on Main Street. It was the hub. So now I'd like to talk about the characteristics of the physical characteristics of Main Street. And typically, the buildings are all what we refer to as zero lot line buildings. That is, they are built right up to the lot line, and there is simply a sidewalk in front of them. There's no open space or green planted space in front of them. There's no 7-Eleven parking. The buildings are right up to the sidewalk. So you can see at the bottom line, they are all at the sidewalk level. And then at the top, the buildings were more or less the same height. You can see there's some variations on that, but generally the buildings were all the same height. And then there was a dividing line for the first floor storefronts. So you can see those are all more or less at the same level as well. And then vertically, the buildings were divided into segments, more or less one storefront segment, anywhere between 20 and 25 feet. So you can see these divisions of the buildings. And as you look at an individual building, they can be divided into three general parts. At the top, you have the cornice, which provides it's kind of like the top hat on the building. Then you have the upper façade windows. That level, you may have apartments or offices in those levels. And then you have the storefront. And this is where the commercial activity occurred in the building. We have two types of storefronts. We have the earlier version, and then we have a later version. So here's the earlier version, and you can see two main areas. There's the display window area, and then the bottom part, we refer to this as the bulkhead. This is the piece of wall on which the storefront rests. So in the earlier storefronts, you can see the glass windows extended from the bulkhead all the way to the top of the opening as one large storefront. And typically the glass was divided into panels. In this instance, you can see 4 panels. And here's your general variety of people hanging out in front of your storefront. In later time, they divided the storefront area into 2 segments. So the upper part is referred to as the transom, and then the lower part was the display window, and then you have the bulkhead. But in both instances, the storefronts had a large amount of glass, and this is so as people walked by, they could look in and see what the store had to offer and perhaps go in. That was also the thinking behind the deep-set doorways. As people would go towards the door, they had more area to display the goods to help to tempt people to come into their storefront. Now, in the Main Street history, I want to briefly describe some of the different building styles you might see on your Main Street or Main Street that you pass through. And these are the different styles I'm going to cover. First is the Italianate style. The dates kind of vary greatly depending on where in the country you were located. The dates may be relevant for more East Coast buildings, but architectural styles took a little more time to travel more inward. So you may find in Michigan that these dates are a little later. So the Italianate style is characterized by these overhanging eaves with decorative brackets They used these in Italy to help shade the sun. They used rounded arch windows with hood ornaments, that is some kind of decoration over the top of the window. And they used classical columns, half columns, or pilasters, all classical elements. In the Victorian era, they were trying to create buildings with a romantic style evoking images of exotic structures. And these generally are eclectic revivals of historical styles, and they have elaborate paint and detail schemes. The Romanesque revival tried to create fortress-like buildings. In the Romanesque period, this was a period in Europe where there were a lot of marauders and pillaging, so they tried to create buildings that were very strong and like a fortress. And this is what happened in the Romanesque revival. They looked fortress-like. They used rounded Roman arches at windows and doors, and they emphasized the by setting the brick back. And they also used rusticated stonework, and this was to make the building look very strong. The early 20th century commercial style came about with using steel in the frame of the buildings. So now we have wide expanses of window. Compare that to the inset where you see the very tall vertical windows. So you can see the windows are now much more horizontal and allow more light in. The structural elements were used for the expression of the building with very little decoration. And the buildings tended to be organized like a column, with the base, which was the storefront area, the shaft, which is the base of the windows, and then the capital, which is the cornice. The Beaux-Arts style emphasized Greek and Roman architecture, and they created, in the Beaux-Arts style, these very colossal-looking buildings. And these typically were used for buildings such as banks, city halls, museums, so they wanted to create a monumental look. And they had monumental entrances, and they were also formal and symmetrical buildings. The Art Deco style is a break with the classical style of architecture which we mostly saw previously. And it tries to show modernity and creativity in expression. And they tended to have streamlined buildings with low-relief geometrical designs. Art Moderne is related to Art Deco, again breaking with the classical style of architecture, but it had more of an emphasis on curvilinear forms than straight angular ones, as Art Deco did, and it tried to use images of transportation, airline planes, trains, and automobiles in the building. Now, the modern style of architecture, it used a curtain wall system. When the structural frame is attached to and supports the exterior wall, the wall does not hold itself up. So more horizontal windows are possible since the wall is not load-bearing. And the walls can be expressed like the work of art since the exterior walls are thin and you don't rely on them to support the building. Now we have what I call eclectic buildings, and these are buildings that have started in one style and then have been modified into a different style. And the secondary style of architecture may be relevant depending on if it's 50 years old and if it has become part of the building. So you may see buildings where the upper part of the windows look very conventional, and then the lower part looks more, in these instances, more Art Deco. So what happened to our main streets? And the reason a lot of the main streets have declined can be placed on cars and malls. With the advent of the automobiles, people could move around more, and then shopping malls developed, so people had one centralized location for shopping. So as the malls grew in popularity, the stores located to the malls, which meant a lot of them left our downtown areas. So that created a lot of building changes and alterations to our buildings because people who own the buildings and businesses downtown looked around, saw the stores leaving to go to the malls, which left them with empty stores and empty buildings, and they panicked. They're trying to figure out what to do to keep people downtown, to keep them from moving out to the mall. So several building changes and alterations occurred. One thing they did is they put slip covers on buildings. These are what we refer to as slip covers. They covered them over because now the malls were all bright and new and sparkling, had bright colors and shiny lights. They thought, hey, let's make our old buildings look new. So we are going to cover them over, and they will look new. But instead, all they really do is they look like old buildings that have been covered over. Then they decided they needed to create some interest. They needed to make downtowns more exciting. So they thought, let's try a theme design. So this is an example of the Alpine theme that was applied to, as you can see, several of the historic buildings in this downtown. So we have the half timbering, we have the gable roofs, and they're trying to evoke almost like a Disneyland image with this. Then they decided, well, maybe people aren't coming downtown because they don't want to walk around in the weather. So what they did is they placed canopies over the sidewalk area so people could walk between buildings and not get wet. But you can see what it ended up doing to the buildings is it created the shadow so you can't really see into the storefront, so you don't know what is there. So that was another idea they tried, which wasn't very successful. And additional building changes occurred. That is, when the storefronts weren't used for stores, they were rented out to different uses, such as offices or different service industries. And those service industries didn't really need all that amount of glass. So they closed in the storefronts, as you can see, and put smaller windows in because they didn't need the large display windows. And a lot of times there were privacy issues, and so they closed in the storefronts. Another thing they did was to reduce or change the windows. So instead of windows with the rounded arch top, they put in normal rectangular windows because these were cheaper. And in some instances, they cover the windows up entirely on the upper levels because they weren't needed. Sometimes the upper levels of the buildings were unused, and sometimes they just had storage in them, so they really didn't need the windows. And there were other changes to them. Some buildings were demolished or partially demolished. You can see in this slide what remained of the building in the slide on the left-hand side is just that small portion that you see on the right-hand side. And they tried coverings on the buildings. They wanted to unify the buildings downtown. So you can see in this instance, they put this consistent horizontal line across the buildings. And then they covered over some of the buildings with the coverings to make them look uniform. So we go from buildings that looked like this in the 1940s to buildings that look like this in the 1910s, where they have been covered over, changed, demolished, reduced in height. So these are the kinds of downtowns we're trying to address with the Main Street program to improve them. Now, there has been a shimmer of hope with some new development. They looked back on history and thought that, well, maybe the downtowns weren't so bad after all. So in some new developments, they're trying to make them look like historical downtowns. Now, you can look at these and judge whether they've been particularly successful, but they've kind of gotten the idea that we want individual storefronts, vertical windows on the upper floor, and then storefronts on the lower part. So an idea that maybe has been coming back. And then even in interior malls, they try to make the buildings look like the old historical downtown buildings. Now this is a historical series of buildings to show you what one building, this little building is located in Wayland, Michigan. The upper left-hand side, you can see the building, the little shoe store as it existed in the 1940s. And then sometime after that, up into including June of 2013, they did this to it. They put on a little gable roof, and they painted it white, and they took down the little towers on either end. Then sometime in September of 2013, they took that stuff off, but you can see that there was a lot of damage in the cornice area when they removed that and the other things. Now, in February of 2014, someone decided the building would look good if it were painted blue. And we recognize that people paint brick, and once it's painted, it's okay to paint it again, but we try to encourage building owners to paint it some color that may resemble a color found in brick. But then you can see in 2016, the building went through rehabilitation, and it looks more like the cute little storefront from the 1940s. And there is a thriving business now in the storefront. So, Main Street's future, we talk about the importance of historic preservation because this is a grassroots, community, and volunteer-driven strategy encouraging economic development through, and I'll emphasize the key words, historic preservation. So, historic preservation is important. We want to try to take our buildings back more or less to the way they used to look to create an authentic downtown that people want to come and shop in. And the buildings and the downtown must function for the people. There needs to be areas of activity, there needs to be clear circulation, there needs to be clear wayfinding so that the downtown area functions for the community. And downtowns are big, complicated things. Not one person owns all the buildings downtown. You have governmental entities, you have civic organizations, you have employers. So there's a lot of things that have to come together. And that's part of the Main Street program. We try to have a managed downtown, just like malls have managers, so we can manage the growth and the activity downtown. Now, the importance of historic preservation is shown in these slides. Here is the old historic downtown of Portland, Michigan. The next slide shows what it looks like in modern times. And the question is, what is it going to look like in the future? And this is where the Main Street program comes into play as we try to improve the downtown building. Here are examples of two communities, Community B, Community B. The slides on the upper part show how the buildings looked several years ago. They were in very poor condition. It was not a very economically viable part of town. And Community A was not involved in the Main Street program, and Community B was. So you can see the difference in modernization that occurred. If you look at Community A, yes, there has been some improvement in the storefronts, but still a lot of the storefronts are empty and closed in, and it hasn't been a consistent rehabilitation of the buildings. Now, if you look at Community B, they were in the Main Street program, and you can see now that we have little cute storefronts. We have a very viable shopping community here. Now, both of these communities are located in Lansing. Community A is in the Rio town of Lansing, and Community B is in Old Town Lansing.
Rio Town is now in the Main Street program, aren't they?
Rio Town is an associate community in the Main Street program, yes. So let's go through a little bit of terminology so we can understand what we're talking about, and also to clarify, because a lot of times these terms are used interchangeably. So preservation is taking measures to protect and stabilize the property, focusing on maintenance repair. And we talk a lot about historic preservation as a general term. Now, what we really do in the Main Street program is called rehabilitation, a modern, compatible use through repair and alterations while preserving the historic features of the building. And we like to call this rehabbing. It's a friendlier kind of term. People get kind of uptight when you start talking about rehabilitation. So we're going to do building rehabbing. Now, restoration is a different process altogether. This is accurately depicting a property as it appeared at a particular period of time. And the example I like to use for this is Mount Vernon. where it has been restored to look the way it did at the time when George Washington lived there. Now, reconstruction is replicating a vanished structure as it appeared at a specific period of time at its historic location based on historic evidence. And my example here is Colonial Williamsburg, which did not exist at all at one point in time, but was rebuilt to look like the historic town. So the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation are the standards that all preservation organizations use. Now, there are also standards for restoration and reconstruction if you're doing those processes, but we're doing rehabbing. So standard number 1 is to retain the original use or to find a compatible new use. The historic use is preferred, but a new use should have minimal changes. So you can see this former gas station is now a little coffee shop.
Actually, now it's not a coffee shop anymore.
I've heard it's now an ice cream store. That's in Old Town, too. Standard 2, do not remove or alter features and spaces that characterize the property. So you can see on the slide on the right, you don't want to remove that bay window. You want to avoid removal of the character-defining materials, and that is in the interior as well. You don't want to close in that monumental stairway because that's what makes the building special. Do not create a false sense of historical development. And a lot of building owners, they tend to go to Home Depot and buy a little colonial pediment and some columns and put them on the buildings, and these are not appropriate at all. Each property should be recognized as the physical record of its time and place, and you want to avoid creating a false sense of history. You want to retain changes that have acquired historic significance in their own right. So on the left-hand side, if this historic building had been covered over in kind of Art Deco materials, and it's over 50 years old, then this may be something you want to retain. This example in the middle is in Boyne City, where the Red Mesa restaurant used to be 2 storefronts, but it is now a landmark restaurant in the town, so it is retained. And then on the right-hand side is the Flotus restaurant in Grand Haven, which also took some historic facades, covered it over in this green panel, but it's been there for more than 50 years and has become a landmark in the city. You want to preserve the distinctive features, finishes, consumption of the historic buildings. You don't want to put inappropriate windows. You want to recreate the storefronts that were there originally. Deteriorated historic features shall be repaired rather than replaced. It's important to keep the historic fabric of the building as possible. Where it has to be replaced, you want to match the original in color, design, texture, and where you can, the materials as well. And these should be based on documented evidence such as photographs. Standard 7, do not use chemical or physical treatments that damage historic materials. You want to use the gentlest means possible to clean the building. In this instance, we're usually talking about brick. So that means a scrub brush and some detergent. You do not want to use sandblasting or power washing, as it removes the exterior layer of brick. And then if you look at the slide in the middle, you can see the rest of the brick starts to deteriorate. And then if it really deteriorates and your mortar is stronger than the brick, you will have something that looks like the slide on the right-hand side. And you should even consider removing paint from the brick, because there are methods of doing this by professionals that will not damage the brick. Standard 8, sometimes we don't think about it, but you may run into archaeological resources in the ground, so you want to try to preserve them. You want to use compatible contemporary design for new construction. You don't want to destroy the defining characters of the building. You want to differentiate them from the old, but they should be compatible. So the slide on the left-hand side, you can see the addition on the left compared to the historic building on the right. But then when you look on the slide on the right-hand side, those 2 buildings are there. You can see them, and they put this oversized addition next to it. So that is an example of what not to do. Standard 10, New additions, which if removed, retain the form integrity of the historic property. So it may cover over things, but it doesn't remove them. So design solutions. You know you need a facade improvement when your building looks like any of these buildings. So you can see some of the inappropriate things that have been done to the buildings. They put on those little shingled roofs. They've covered over the storefronts. They have locked off the cornice on the top, and they have walled in the storefront windows. So cities were formed for commerce, and downtown buildings house businesses. So first impressions of your downtowns are really important. 70% of first-time sales at restaurants, retail shops, lodging facilities, and attractions come from curb appeal. When people look and say, that looks like a nice place to either eat or shop or stay. So aesthetically pleasing buildings are sold and leased more quickly, since businesses in them can attract customers more. People really want and are attracted to authentic places. So here are some simple design solutions. We'll start with the simple ones and then go to the more complex ones. Simple one is to paint it. Now, we do not encourage people painting brick if it is unpainted because you are signing up for a lifetime of maintenance. But if the brick is currently painted, it's okay to repaint, but we would suggest that you choose a brick-like color which is compatible. And again, consider removing the paint from the brick. You want to use the paint to highlight the details of the building, to show off the building. And paint can make a big difference on a building. Here you can see just some simple paint colors and the restoration of the storefront makes this a very attractive building. Don't try to regulate paint colors. Now, we do not recommend you paint unpainted brick, but if someone does want to choose to repaint, allow them to choose the colors. It's kind of like a patchwork quilt. The variety of colors makes a more interesting downtown look. Now, awnings are another simple device to add interest to the buildings. And this is a passive solar system that was used in the olden days before there was air conditioning, and this provided sun control, especially on the south-facing elevations or on the west. It blocked the sun in the summer, and then in the winter you could roll up the awnings to allow the natural sun to heat the space. Now this shows appropriate awnings. They should not cover over the central piers. There should be one awning per building, and the name of the building should appear on the apron rather than the top of the awning. So these are good examples of awnings. Here you see a building that has a more appropriate awning rather than the roof and the coverings over the windows. So you can see the building next door to it did not remove its little roof, and the awnings are more appropriate to the historic building. Here's a little storefront where they have removed the shingled little roof and in its place put an awning. And you can see the difference that this makes along with restoring the storefront. These are inappropriate kinds of awnings. On the upper left, the awning stretches over two buildings, which we would recommend not doing. We like to be able to have each building expressed individually and to have individual awnings. On the right-hand side, we try not to use the awning as a big advertising billboard, so we prefer the name not be on the awning proper. And then the shape of the building is the one that's illustrated in the center. We don't want to use the curved ones. You want to just use the angled awnings, the type that were used historically. So this is my soapbox and whine about the little Mansard roofs that are popping up everywhere. The slide on the upper left shows Paris, and this is where the Mansard roof originated. Back in the time in Paris and most of Europe, buildings were taxed on how many rooms you had. So that's why you don't find a lot of closets in Europe. They would have a piece of furniture, an armoire, for you to put your clothing in. Another thing with taxation is they did not tax any rooms that were considered under the roof. That's why they developed the Mansard roof. Francois Mansard developed it, in fact, so that you could have a lot of usable space in the room, but for tax purposes, it was not taxed. So this is the origins of the Mansard roof. Now, Three Rivers has some beautiful Mansard roofs, true Mansard roofs that I found in Michigan. And then the slide on the left right shows New England shakes. And that's because there was a lot of wood in New England, and they used these on the fishing shanties and more residential buildings. But for some reason, they decided we should put little Mansard roofs with shakes on them on our downtown buildings, which are very inappropriate. So here you can see 3 illustrations of Mansard roofs with the wood shakes, which are not appropriate. So I will get off my soapbox and continue on to another design solution, which are signs. So these are the 3 primary types of signs we find on downtown buildings. Panel signs are attached to the front of the building. They are good for expressing some of the character of the business inside, and they can be individual letters, signs on signboards, or signs suspended above the doorways. You don't want to have one sign that stretches across more than one storefront. Again, we try to preserve the buildings as individuals, so it would be more appropriate to have a signboard for each of the buildings. Projecting signs are very pedestrian friendly, and we like to encourage these. These go back to the time when a lot of people did not know how to read, and so they would include a symbol of the business that was located inside. So these are great for people strolling down the street to see what businesses are coming up, and they, again, can be very expressive of business. Window signs are almost like stickers that are attached to the windows, but you can see in these examples they are small. You're still able to look through the stickers and the window signs to see what's available in the storefront. We still want people to be able to see what you're selling in your storefront. So these are things not to do with your window signs. On the left-hand side, you don't want your storefront window to turn into a billboard and advertise everything you have in the store on your storefront. And on the right-hand side, you should have good quality signage using quality materials in the building. So no poster board paint signs on the storefronts, please. So we want to improve the storefronts. So you can see here the before and the after of the storefront. So on the left-hand side, what's going on in there, you don't really know, it's closed in, you can't see. But on the right-hand side, it looks like a store where maybe you would go in. Here's another example. The storefront may have been used for offices or some other kind of purpose, and where they had closed in the walls and the windows, and it was very self-contained and closed in. So on the right-hand side, you can see the restored storefront, where now you can see what's going on, and this is a viable commercial enterprise. In this example, very simply, they took out the trim work around the small windows and restored the storefronts and gave it a nice paint combination. Here, this is an example where they basically redesigned the building. It originally looked like it did on the left-hand side, and this is the main street in the community. This is Boyne City, and the little Provisions building basically turned its back on Main Street. So in remodeling it, you can see now that they have created a storefront on Main Street. The doorway on the side is still there, but now people strolling down Main Street buy the display to go in and shop. This is Niles, Michigan, where they decided to use Conyers material and cover over all of the storefront with this metal material. And they decided to take it off. So overnight, they removed the brown metal. They referred to it as the Big Brown Takedown to to then expose the historic buildings that were behind the metal slipcovers. Another way to improve the buildings is to replace the cornices. So you can see in the before and after samples here how the building almost looks like it had its eyebrows shaved off, but the restoration of the cornice really helped the look of the building. And in Howell, this was done on an entire block of buildings where they reconstructed the cornice, lifted it into place, and you can just see the difference it makes between the before and after. It looks like, its hat was put back on. Now, sometimes we want to consider improving the rear facades. Some businesses have parking lots in the rear, and we want them to look good because people use the rear facade, the rear entrance as well. So in this example, it was simply paint, probably that looked like the front of the building, and some improvement in signage, a little bit of a canopy, and it looks like a nice store to walk into. But how do you get from the example on the left, a closed-in facade, which looks like a very nice place to shop? And we do this in the Michigan Main Street program through design consultations and design services, which is what I provide for the Main Street program. So this is offered to our select and master level communities. The building owner would apply for the service. It would then be chosen or selected or approved by the design committee. Then the design specialists will meet with the building owners to gather historic photos, measure, and photograph the building. And then the sketch or design package is complete, and then there's a follow-up with the building owner to make sure that the design is appropriate to their needs. So these are some examples of design consultations, which are just quick sketches that I typically do over photographs, where it's pretty straightforward. They just need to refresh their facade. So in this instance, it was to repaint the painted brick, more of a brick color, add some signage, more appropriate windows, and maybe a flower box or two. Now, this is an example of a design service. This is a more comprehensive service, and you can see the insert photograph shows the historic building, and it looks like the photograph on the upper right-hand side. And this design was to bring it back to the way it used to look. That was removing the enclosure from the first floor to add the decorative railing on the upper level, the front of the building, but also the side of the building. So this was a very large project. The back of the building also had an addition to it, and that little storefront needed to be restored to the way it used to look too. So you can see the recommendations show removing concrete blocks, putting windows back in, and in this instance, they want to remove the paint from the brick. This is an example from Owasso. The building, you can see the insert on the left-hand side, was part of the electric company in Owasso at the time. The photograph in the top of the drawing, you can see it was a Denny's store, so of course they had to have the little greenhouse stuck on the front. And this design calls for having that removed and restoring the storefront. This was an interesting project in Howell. We were really scratching our heads to find out how the building came to look like it did in the photograph in the upper right-hand corner of the drawing. And we discovered that in 1935 there was a fire. So if you look at the historic photos on the left, the upper one shows the building after the fire in 1935. And the windows had arches on them. The whole facade was taller. And then later, they remodeled the building. And so this is the version that we are doing the design service toward because it has gained a historic significance. Here's an example from Three Rivers, 2 historic buildings where we're restoring the storefront windows, and it's going to be a brew pub. This is a storefront in Saline where they had covered over the historic materials, and it is to restore the storefront as well as the bay window on the second floor. This design service is for Blissfield, a prominent building on the corner of Adrian Street and Lane Street, and it was previously a bank, and so it was to restore the storefronts and put the awnings back in place. Now, we had a little bit of work to do with the color of the awning, and this is to show we aim to please. We went through a series of drawings. Upper left-hand side, the owner told me to pick a color for the awnings, and I picked blue, and the owner didn't like blue. So he suggested maroon. So in the upper right, we have maroon awnings. He didn't like those, so the owner suggested black. So in the lower left, we did black. He thought that was too severe. We tried gray. He didn't like the gray. So that is why we ended up with the green awnings. But with AutoCAD drawings, I can change the colors relatively easily to help with the design that the owner likes as well as is functional for him. This is another design service in Grayling. Formerly, the Grayling's very first car dealership that we are opening up the storefront windows. Sample from Boyne City, restoring the storefront of the former IOOF building in downtown, and that was opening up the windows and restoring the pediment at the top of the building. So this one is quite a dramatic change where the windows had been covered over and restoring the storefront. In Portland, this little shingled mansard looks like it's enveloping the building, but once removed, reveals two little cute storefronts. And even chain restaurants can be talked into storefront rehabs here. Not only was it a shingled roof, but it was painted yellow. This is another example from Boyne City. And you can see it's much improved with the storefront rehabilitation. Here's an example from Mansard. And this is one from Niles, and when I saw the photograph of the building, when it looked like the slide on the left, I thought, oh my gosh, that looks terrible. And the program manager said, well, you've eaten in that restaurant, and I didn't even realize that the Nugget restaurant in Niles used to look like the slide on the left-hand side. Here's an example from Oswego where they had decided they didn't need the storefront windows for the hardware store, and they covered it all over in the thin stone material, and it's recently show the storefront. And here's another example from Wayne where the storefront has been rehabbed. So this is the importance of historic preservation, where we have the photograph of the historic downtown, what it looks like today, and then it's a question of what is it going to look like in the future. And this is the benefit of the Main Street program. We want to impact how the community is going to look in the future. We want the communities to be authentic. It's going to be incremental change. It's going to be change that's decided on for the people of the community, by the people of the community, and it is going to be a transformative change. So here is my contact information. If you or someone you know has a community that might be interested in making it look like a better place to live for everybody, get in touch with me and we can talk to the community.
Thank you for attending today's webinar. If you ever have any ideas or topics or suggestions for ways to connect you to resources that can help you, or if I can assist you with any membership-related questions or upcoming training questions, please feel free to contact me at lisa@sedum.info or 517-485-3588. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you in the next month or two at some of the next upcoming opportunities. Have a great day. Thanks again, Debra.
Oh, quite welcome.